Fat Boys, week 6 has obviously come and gone. This was the second in a row of real tough bye weeks, but crazily enough, that was our second week in a row of a whole lot of green and a lot of high scoring, except for me, and maybe a few other small exceptions. So I could go on, and I will in a second, about my particular standing, but let's have a quick pause before we get there, and let's look at some stories around the NFL. Only a couple weeks ago, I suggested everyone went to their roster and decided who should stay and who should go, and who knew that actual NFL teams might have been listening. Coming into week 7, we've had a couple weeks in a row now of some major shifts that I thought would be worth mentioning, because some of us, if you're not doing so well, maybe you're considering some major shifts. Maybe this is inspiration, but the reasons why I think would be a little bit different. I think the team that pops up first is obviously New York Jets for a couple reasons. I already kind of spoke last week about, the big decision and getting rid of the head coach and all that mess. And sure enough, at this point in time, just after the release, Rodgers, who is a noted critic of mainstream media and yet is kind of a part of it now, made it very clear that he had nothing to do with the firing, and that even though they had some verbal altercations and some disagreements, that they would have worked it out. And this was just as much a surprise to him as it was to everyone else. And yet 1 week later, they hired his bestest buddy as the wide receiver, traded for, and now Davante Adams is going to be a Jet. Maybe a few weeks after a few people thought that they would, but does make you kind of think if Rodgers does have some input. I don't know. He's always been very skeptical, so maybe you should follow his advice and do your own research and not just listen to the person on TV talking. But this did get me thinking a little bit about what would be next. Now, we do have some other coaches who could be on the chopping block. Most notably after Dallas just got absolutely embarrassed by the Lions. If you didn't catch that, it was near 50 to under 10. That would be probably one of the odds-on favorites, but personally, and if you like gambling, if you don't, I don't know why you'd be in this league, but if you like gambling and you can gamble on things like this, I'm just saying check the odds for Jacksonville's coach, because you're looking at the New York Jets situation just multiplied by a little bit. Now, to kind of remember why and what happened before the Jets fired their head coach, well, they had a London game where they lost a game they were supposed to lose against one of the only undefeated teams in Minnesota. But their owner is Woody Johnson. I'm going to pause while you giggle at his name. And yes, he is the same Woody Johnson, who's a noted kind of Trump supporter, also was the U.S. ambassador to the UK and Johnson & Johnson affiliate. So when he was in London, it was noted that he was there with a bunch of his billionaire friends talking about awesome billionaire things, only to watch his team get, and as probably he quotes, embarrassed. And then he made a pretty rash decision. The reason I'm suggesting that is not because I think the decision's bad, but let's start making predictions as to what's next. Jacksonville now celebrates their second week in a row in London, and they are kind of London's darling team. When they were sticking London with people, it was the Jacksonville Jaguars all throughout. So they actually get at least a game there every year. But now it's their second game in a row. Last week, they coughed one up to the Bears. This week, they're playing the Patriots, who are not a good team, but they do have a new, young, and exciting quarterback people are talking about. So if the Jaguars lose, we could look at their owner, Shahid Khan, and if that name sounds familiar, you might be a wrestling fan. He is a co-owner of a wrestling company. Not that one. They made the Netflix documentary. The other one, the other big one. I guess you have to know more wrestling if you know that. But he also is an owner of the Fulham Football Club, and he did have a bunch of his rich people friends watching his rich people team do their thing, and they did not do their thing. 2 weeks in a row, billionaire owner, ego. Kind of sounds like if the Jacksonville Jaguars are out, so is Doug Peterson as head coach, but we'll see. In terms of another team, and let's be honest, this is the last team I want to talk about, both because it's the last team I'm going to talk about today, but also it's the last team I ever want to talk about, my Cleveland Browns. They're the other ones who made a trade. Now I could look on the positive and talk about the Bills, who get Amari Cooper, and could be a massive steal to any Cooper owners out there. Instead, I'd like to focus on my Browns that are just now trading away everything, because just recently I was around a few people that have football teams that they like, and they were talking to me about what it's like to watch their team play, and how much more nervous they get and how excited they get on a win. And I guess I just can't relate, can I? Because that's not really something us Brown fans do right now. And it really is to do with not just our anemic offense that scores anywhere between 13 and 18 points every week, and I'm not joking, that's our margin and you can bet on it. But once again, not to mention him too many more times, but we did sign someone who was accused of so many things, and we signed him after the accusations to one of the largest guaranteed contracts of all time. The only reason I mention this is when I saw Denver was playing on the Thursday nighter. That reminded me of when I did go and see Denver at Cleveland many, many years ago on a Thursday night. And I thought about bad quarterbacking decisions because most of you know me. If you see me show up to a draft with a Cleveland Browns jersey, I bought it that week. Let's go Brady Quinn, in for a comeback. But their current quarterback actually has only been in Cleveland for about 3 years. Not 3 full seasons yet, but it is true. He has had more settlements than thrown touchdowns. So let's just that sit in for a good second. So if you do have a favorite football team, feel great about cheering for it because the alternative is being a Browns fan. Now, a bit of a through line for our first 2 matchups that's going to come up is will Jake and I actually manage to get together for the first time? Well, obviously you saw us all at the draft. We reunited downtown this time, and the morning after we watched kind of the Red Zone repeat. So it's awesome sitting next to a few guys, watching football, talking about fantasy teams. But then to have the worst fantasy week, we'll get to me in a second, that you've had in like probably ever, sitting next to our number 1 and our number 2 leading scorers, just put yourself in that frame of mind. So I'll do this without bias here, but congratulations, V. The 144 was the top mark for this week. And the craziest part, if we look at your team, your defense was the 3rd best, but in terms of our top 5, no one else cracked it. But you just kind of went off all around. Now, you did have the potential for a pretty interesting Monday Night Miracle. We'll get to that one, obviously, in a couple matchups. You did have an 8-point lead, 77% chance of winning because you had Hall and Waylon had Wilson. Obviously, Wilson had one of his best weeks, and John, actually, your wide receivers were your strength. That was in row here, wide receiver 3, and then welcome back to AJ for you with wide receiver 4. Must have felt good to have that, that kind of consistency back. So hopefully for you, that kind of produces as we move on. But Will, you didn't really have necessarily anyone else who went like off, but everyone who just had great weeks. I mean, Breece Hall obviously had his best week, and he's just outside of our top 5. I think he was our running back 6. But to have Najee go off for 20, to have Zay go off for nearly 20, so you just kind of got scoring from all ends here, and that's what ended up doing for you. Whereas Waylon, you did need a few more people to come through. Now, you obviously were no slouch. 137 is going to win you 95% of the times, but this is that other 5%. You only really had Evans as your massive underperformer, and had he done what he's normally been doing, you would have taken him down anyway. Your defense obviously doing quite well in Houston there. They were a defense 4. On the bench, you guys made the fine decisions. No real reason to kind of dig this one up. In fact, the Brian Thomas Jr. would have been even worse, so well done there because some people did have them in their rosters. John, the downside is you won this week, but with all the scoring, that's going to help you out. You still stay in our top 4. V, you needed this one, and you needed this one. This is where you climbed out not only by winning, but also by scoring a lot. You did jump ahead a few spots. You know what, we're just going to rip this one off like a Band-Aid. First 2, just get the pain out of the way. The other person on the couch was Jake. Obviously at the beginning, now in terms of our structure and how we did things, I watched, and I believe Jake did as well, the London game was about, earlier-ish or late-ish our time on Sunday, so we got to watch that one. Then we went radio silent and watched all the Red Zone together. So all we knew was Cole Kmet had gone off. I was feeling great about the world, and then... when someone has like massive heat stroke and they were sweating a lot and all of a sudden they stop sweating and that's when you're nervous? Yeah, Jake was talking a lot of game for a bit about the comeback, getting real excited, getting really, into it. And then we just kind of stopped talking about this matchup at one point, and that was all that really needed to be said. He didn't need to kick me while I was down. And, thank you, Jake, for being such a gracious winner on that one. Now, Godwin with our wide receiver 1, that was kind of a big score for you. Nixon was technically the running back 2, but he was our running back 1 because no one had Tucker starting. I mean, even had Bucky Irvin going off for a solid 17. The only sniff I got of the top 5 was Love, but, yes, I would have had more points, but not 70 more points. So let's stop talking about this one. Tell you what, I need to do some work. I definitely need a big win and maybe a little bit of a win streak to get back. That you got to score more than that, folks, in this league. But Jake, a dominant win pops you up to our top 2. So congrats, pal. I alluded to the Monday Night Miracle before, and here it is, less than 1 point. And coming into the Monday Nighter, now technically B was only a 62% favorite, but 23.42 point advantage, and all Horst had was Allen, and that's all Horst needed. We know with Allen, it's not about his yardage. 215 is nothing to really write home about, but the 2 touchdowns throwing and the 1 on his feet, as per usual, just squeaked you over. Now, Horst, you did have some things to kind of deal with. You had the running back 5 in Monty, but then a no-show at tight end. Great pickup in Tracy at running back, but then a complete no-show and no-sell on defense for Seattle. So you kind of ebbs and flows. B, you can't really get too picky here. I mean, yes, there's a few things that certainly would have helped you out, but your tight end was the tight end 2. You had Bijan, which was our running back 4. And you definitely had some people that helped you. I mean, the kicker was just out of the top 5, but let's be honest, Harrison getting hurt. And then it's all about Dax. If Dax does legitimately anything that Dax normally does, you win this matchup. But you didn't. And if we look at the bench, the crazy thing is Chuba here actually would not have helped you because all of your running backs did just fine. You had enough to win in most kind of situation. Well, 108. Let's not go crazy here. I'd say with our with the way things were going down, you two were a very good matchup with each other, and it just worked out. It would have been kind of funnier if you put Olave in instead of Harrison and actually ended up losing by 1, but you didn't, so it could have been worse. And going into here, I mean, neither one of you can complain too much. You're both 500. You're both technically in the playoffs, so guys, it could be a lot worse. Congrats, Horst, though. Monday Miracle. Even when he stinks, he still pulls it off, and I know that's coming from me, and I stunk way worse. But Mark, 103 is not your best effort. It was over your predicted, and given your kind of situation this week, not the worst thing in the world. You did have a wide receiver 5 in Debo and the running back 3 in Henry. Of course, you also had a no-show and a few kind of underperformances as well. But you muscled one out. I think Justin had way worse luck. If you look at his running backs, way underperforming. Likely not, well, he's off and on at best. Now, Justin, you did have your kicker at kicker 3, and Lamar did just fine. But if you take a look, obviously this was a week that both of you knew you were pretty vulnerable, so it wasn't going to be massively high scoring. So Mark, if you had a massive bye week and you muscled one out, I don't know, might be in the stars, pal. Closer to my end of the pool down here, we had 2 guys who definitely needed that win. Ben, you muscled one out and you jumped up a couple spots. Now, your Lamb Burrow definitely helped you out. Now, Lamb not as much, but considering what Dallas did, that's exceptional, the fact that he was able to get that many points because nobody else did. Now, Etienne, obviously, it sucks when it would have been better if you started no one than the person that you started. So your running backs, had you lost, would have been kind of the downfall, I think, for you. You did have the tight end 5 in McBride, and obviously you got some points from your kicker defense combo here, which made up for it. If you take a look just at the bench quick, we knew this would be an issue, but you did have McLovin, so that could have been a little bit spicier had you thrown him in, but wide receivers weren't really your problem. Could have used him at flex, though. Biggest thing, and this is going to spur it on, this conversation's gone on 4 or 5 times, but we should vote for it every year. Do we want an IR spot? If I would have asked Chaz going into this week, he would have said, hell yeah, because he effectively just benched and had a no-for just so he didn't have to change his roster. Now, the only thing that sucks, sorry, Chaz, I don't know if you've done the math, but I did the math. If you started your boy and you went Chicago heavy, yeah, you would have taken Ben down. So the fact that you put Caleb on the bench. Now, who knew Caleb would have the matchup or the game that he did? He was our quarterback 2 on the week. And now he goes into bye, and you're going to have more buys because you got a bunch of, Chicago wide receivers. So are you going to skirt it again, or are you just going to hope for the best? I guess only time will tell. I like starting with kind of the league table just so I can say, whoa, this league is so close, because it is. I mean, you're only a couple games out, points scored going to matter, yada, yada, you can see it. But 5-1 down to 2-4 with most people kind of in the middle here. Being 500 doesn't even necessarily guarantee a top 6 spot, but all that's about to change, I think. Week 7 as we flip, this is now our midway point, so I can point to a couple matchups, but realistically, they all matter. They can't not at this point. No one's certainly out of it. I'd say here are 3 versus 4 kind of grabs my eye, and careful, John, because Horst seems to have a knack of just coming from behind here and getting a 1-point victory, and that's essentially what he's predicted to do right now. We also all got to pay attention to our number 1 seed, and especially if they're playing a playoff team. But like I said, there's a bunch of tight matchups. I know that there's a few issues with buys, but not too many. So make your decisions, because right now, week 7, we go to week 14. We still have the windows open, but week after week now, they might start closing. What can I say that I haven't already said before? Things are tight. Things are crazy. Every matchup matters, yada, yada, yada. So let's pay attention to the schedule. Obviously, we've got the dud of a Thursday nighter that this will be out just before. I say dud just because I'm not super pumped about it, but will I still follow it and watch it? Sure, of course I will. We also have a weird one again this weekend, so it's our last of our 3 London games, UK games. I think this is just outside London maybe, but I could be wrong. Then we'll take a break before we go back to Europe. Also 2 Monday nighters, so one of the 2 should at least be okay. We'll see how that breaks down. But obviously NFL is one thing, our league is another, so good luck, make the right moves, make the right waiver predictions, because like I said in the thing, the window is open right now for everybody, but week after week, that is going to change slightly. So best of luck, folks, in week 7.